What does Putin have to do with the current state of the Christian Science movement? Hi, my name is Julie. I was born into the Christian Science church and religion, and after 40 years, I went my own way. And I feel that brought me back to the place where I can have an individual relationship with God that is not governed by other mortals and what other mortals think about how I should have that relationship and what I should be doing. It's a free relationship where I'm only subject to the divine mind and not any other authority. And I think that's where we're dealing with the relationship between Vladimir Putin and the Christian Science movement of today. And the relationship is that there are authoritative elements in both. You know, Vladimir Putin has this belief about how to govern, how people should be governed, how a country should be governed, how a world should be governed. And his belief system is so precarious. It's built on personal beliefs, history, ideas from others, trial and error, all the human stuff. Somehow he got to this belief system that this is how it works and this is the only way it works. And I'm the only one that knows, and people close to me are the only one that knows this. And so we're the only ones that can be trusted with running things. And the people aren't trusted with making their own decisions about who to govern them and how to govern them. Government institutions aren't even trusted to be on their own. Everything has to be run by him, his way. He's so afraid. He's Bashar, one of the spiritual teachers of today, says he's so afraid. He's so afraid that he's not going to get his way. That his need to dominate continues to get stronger and stronger. He's not in a secure position mentally. He doesn't know. He has no connection with the divine mind. Well, he does have a connection with the divine mind. The divine mind is really his mind. But he's trying to run everything from a mortal sense of things and sees no one else out there as having any clue. He's the only one with any clue. And so no one else has this connection to God either. He doesn't believe he has it. He doesn't aware of it. And he doesn't believe anyone else has it. Like, no one else has this connection to the divine mind. He's the only one that can save everyone. And there's an article in Miscellaneous Writings on page 370 called Blind Leaders. And Mrs. Eddy dealt with this. She dealt with this a lot within the Christian Science church in her day, when she's the one that the truth was revealed, and she was the one that was like, had the falling apple moment, the aha moment, and then just wanted to share it with everybody. All these other people came in and said, oh, we're going to like take her aha moment, we're going to teach it to you in this way, and you listen to us and we'll show you. And even a lot of people said she was wrong. Even her closest students, like Kimball, told his students occasionally that she was wrong about this and she was wrong about that. And the people running the church, up to the very end, middle management, everyone within that church, it takes a lot of people to run the Christian Science church. And you have like what I would call middle management, lower management, and then you have the board of directors. And oftentimes, she did get to pick the board of directors for the most part, but there were so many people within that middle management, lower management that wanted her out, that wanted to like, we got it from here and we'll take it from here. like, they were just like, oh, she's just too this, and she's always listening to God for everything. I mean, every decision has to go through God. It's just like, we want to do it this way because that's how churches are run, and this is how businesses are run, and we know what's best. And when you read her biographies, it wasn't always clear to the biographist that this is what was going on. But I think when you read prose works and the articles that she chose to put into prose works, it's pretty clear. And Blind Leaders is one of those articles. And it's really a short article, so I'll just read it. It's just like a few paragraphs, really small paragraphs. Starting on page 370 of Miscellaneous Writings. What figure is less favorable than a wolf in sheep's clothing? The braying donkey whose ears stick out is less troublesome. What manner of man is it that has discovered an improvement on Christian Science, a metaphysical healing by which error destroys error, and would gather all sorts into a national convention by the sophistry that such is the true fold for Christian healers, since the Good Shepherd cares for all? Yes, the Good Shepherd does care for all, and his first care is to separate the sheep from the goats. And by this is among the first lessons on healing taught by our great master. If, as the gentleman aforesaid states, large flocks of metaphysicians are wandering about without a leader, what has opened his eyes to see the need of taking them out of the care of the great shepherd, and behold the remedy to help them by his own leadership? Is it that he can guide Christian Scientists better than they, through the guidance of our common Father, can guide themselves? Or is it that they are incapable of helping themselves thus? I, as their teacher, can say they know far more of Christian Science than he who deprecates their condition appears to, and my heart pleads for them to possess more and more of truth and love. But mixing all grades of persons is not productive of the better sort, although he who has self-interest in this mixing is apt to propose it. Whoever desires to say good right and good wrong has no truth to defend. It is a wise saying that men are known by their enemies. To sympathize in any degree with error is not to rectify it, but error always strives to unite in a definition of purpose with truth, to give it buoyancy. What is under the mask but error in borrowed plumes? She never did a see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, like people think that she did. She called out error when she saw it. It's important to call out error when you see it. It's important to know what errors are governing you and others. It's clear to us what errors are governing Putin, but is it clear to us what errors are governing the Christian Science movement? I think a lot of people get into working for the church, either the branch church or the mother church, and they have this sense of, I need to help others. I need to steady the ship. I need to make sure pure Christian Science is what's talked about, what's written about. I need to set a good example for others. There's a lot of I think you would call them good mortal intentions for people getting into working at the mother church or working at being a Christian Science practitioner, or deciding to become a teacher, or going to work at a branch church. But everything I just said is I know what's right, and that others don't know what's right, and so I want to make sure I'm involved in the putting together of the periodicals, or the running of the church, or anything within the church. And a lot of them say, well, they do it because they love Christian Science. But you wonder where God is in this. Maybe they're believing, well, God is, I'm inspired to, I want to make God proud, or I want to prove that God is the only power. Maybe they're thinking God is in that. But, decisions like that are really important, to be listening to divine mind and only, taking positions that we're led to, and only doing things that we're led to. I'm a really unwilling participant in what I'm doing. Like, I have, listened and followed and been led to, I was led into the church, I was led out of the church, I was led into the practice, I was led out of the practice, and then I was led to have conversations with certain individuals high up in the church, including my teacher, and then I'm being led to do these videos, and I wake up with ideas, or they come to me. There's a lot of I have to get out of the way, because if little Julie had her way, I would still be an accountant. I mean, I still do accounting to pay the bills. That's how I earn my money. And I'll do some accounting for a while, and then I will not for a while. I will just have a lot of time for quiet contemplation, study, and then I'll be led to another accounting job. But if little Julie had her way, I would have stayed an accountant all these years instead of leaving for all the I was led out of my positions. I was led like, okay, it's time to leave, and now you're going to be a practitioner for a while. What? What? I make a lot of money. What? So I've always been, like, from a Julie perspective, an unwilling participant. But at a higher level, I've always known that I would be obedient. I know I'll be obedient. I have a desire and a love of truth, and I will be obedient to truth and divine mind. When I hear it, I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. That's I won't diverge. I won't have a Jonah moment where, where Jonah, the story of Jonah, where God was, said, go, get thee to, what was it? Get thee to, I should, let Jonah and the whale. If you Google that, you can also look in Concord, but it's Nineveh. Get thee to Nineveh, and tell them about the truth, because they need it really badly right now. And Jonah's like, no. I mean, I think he even said, yeah, okay, but then he went the other way, and he finally wound up doing what God asked him to do, and it made all the difference to Nineveh. It was Nineveh, the people in Nineveh were like, this is great. This is, we get what you're saying. We understand what we've been doing wrong. And they changed, and they were like, thank God that you listened. Thank God that you followed. And yeah, he didn't do it willingly until the end. But so, like, I don't want to spend 3 days in the belly of a whale. So I do, I do what I'm asked, and I do what I'm told, and I'm obedient. And yeah, I'd rather be an accountant. When I was an accountant, full time, I was working my way up. It was good money. We went on really nice vacations. We got to, we ate out all the time. It was nice. But our life's not like that anymore. And I'm okay with that. But, if little Julie had her way, it would be the old way, So I think, sometimes in the movement, a lot of times people think it's their, that they want to do this for a lot of different, they want to go work for the Mother Church for a lot of different reasons. And you have all the different reasons. You have money, you have status, you have social standing, you have the people who have the women that keep their maiden name because they wanted everyone to know that they've been in it for a while and their family's in it, and they wanted you to know how high they are up in the church or how important they are. I'm a big deal. I just want you to know I'm a big deal. That's why I keep my maiden name, And men, it's not just women, but that's just an easy example that they have a sense of duty or obligation to the church, to Christian Science, to Mayor Baker Eddy, because that's what they were taught. That's the only thing they know. And that seems right to them. It seems right to have a duty or obligation or feeling of loyalty to church or religion, to a leader. And but where's God in that, And I think that, this blind leader article, she points out that so in this instance of this article, it looks like someone was trying to create a national Christian Science convention because maybe they thought, oh, there are all these Christian scientists wandering around without a teacher or without a church, and let's bring them all together. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, we can look at that now and go, yeah. That's not a good idea. Let's bring them together, and I'm gonna be their leader, and they'll be my fold, and I'll tell them because I don't want them to be lost and not knowing what to do. Let me teach the ignorant ones. That's what this individual, she said this individual was thinking. But I think we know that Mrs. Eddy was not in any hurry to start a church. In fact, she would not have started a church if it was up to her. I mean, the Science and Health, her first edition of Science and Health, she made it in no certain terms clear to any reader that church and religion is not what she's after and not what it's about. This is just a truth for you to start to understand who you really are. It's for the individual. It's for individual growth. It's for each of us on the ascension journey. This is a critical element of our ascension journey, is to understand who we really are, because we've gotten off track and we believe we're the human personality. We didn't know we're the immortal soul, the being behind it all. And all this stuff going on at the human level, politics and education and financial institutions and savings and retirement and human government. And we didn't know all this stuff was just our own creating out of our feeling of separation from our source. And that's the thing is that she was bringing out is all of this stuff is of our own creating. And when you finally come back into yourself as soul, none of that is important anymore, and none of it holds you anymore, and it can't govern you anymore. It can't, everything is trying to tell you what to do and how to think, and this is the way things work. Everything in our world, we grow up and all we hear is the medical facility. They're the ones causing all the problems in the world, telling us that there's these diseases with these you know, you can take these medicines and this one's incurable and this one, you know, and that, so that's all you hear is just about the medical institution. Like, but I mean, but it was everything. She talked about, you know, the leavening the three measures of meal, science, theology, and medicine. And it's leavening it to the point of true understanding. And these institutions are all there. They've come about out of our misunderstanding. But as we gain a true understanding of being, we just kind of resign from them. We back off. We start watching from them from a distance and see others all caught up in them. And we're like, well, I know divine mind is leading all every minute. And, you know, as it's time for each of them, they will each, you know, find their way out of the mortal dream, the mortal illusion. But you don't get upset about it, and you don't get involved in it, and it really doesn't rattle you anymore. Political events and drama and, you know, social media, all the trying to get you so excited about this or that. I mean, not that you don't engage or pay attention to, you know, these things. You pay attention, you watch what's going on, but you don't feel this sting inside anymore that kind of holds you to it, like hoping for a certain outcome or worried that this might happen if they do that, then this is what's going to happen. And, you know, you don't fall for that stuff anymore at all. And so you start to gain this altitude. So in this article, you know, someone was trying to bring all the Christian Scientists together because they thought, well, they don't have any guidance. And she was like, yeah, they have the one guidance, the only guidance they need, the only leader they need. This article is called Blind Leaders. They only need one, and that's their true mind, divine mind. And she says that, you know, they know more than you think they do. Just like, and that's like where we're at with Putin. You know, I don't think my people know how to govern themselves. Only me and a few of my friends that I've made wealthy, they know. And they're going to be loyal to me. But no one else really knows. No one else gets it, you know? So we're just going to be in charge. And that's how this individual was. And she was like, you know. And it's, in the end, you know, error always strives to unite in a definition of purpose with truth, to give it buoyancy. So you can see how mortal mind would want to take over the Christian Science church, you know, and unite with our definition of truth, and, you know, come to us in a way that we'll go, oh yeah, okay, we'll defer to you, you know, like in our churches, sometimes mortal mind governs an individual to, you know, act with this air of, I know what, you know, what we should do about everything. And, oh, this person is taking medicine, so we should, you know, have them leave the church, or, you know, they can choose, but they can't do both. And you know, oh my goodness, and you know, I had this wonderful healing, and I'm going to share it with you, you know. Error kind of uses the truth, like hides in the form of truth, strives to unite in a definition of purpose with truth to give it buoyancy. I think I got really confused because it was almost like a bullying at what I experienced in the Christian Science church. Is error to get its point across, that to try and get us focused on the, getting away from self-examination, which is what she wanted us to do, this self-examination where we go to God, ask to be unwound from our belief of life as a human, life as a mortal. Error doesn't want that. Mortal mind doesn't want that because it sees it as its end. Once they realize they're immortals, what it's going to happen to us? Well, yeah, mortal mind, a collection of errors, will disappear. But it isn't a self, really. But it's fighting for its life as us and saying, well, we're gonna disappear. So that's not what I want. So it kind of bullies us into saying, well, it makes individuals into like authoritarians or autocrats or, guidance. Like, we're the ones that are going to guide you. We're going to lead you. We're going to tell you what you can and cannot do as a Christian Scientist. And it kind of bullies us because you see a lot of people walking around like, sheepishly walking around as Christian Scientists, like afraid to say anything because there's a bully around that's going to correct their, oh, you're not ill. You think you're ill. You can't say you're ill. You have to say, I believe I'm ill. And they may not be mean about it, outwardly mean, but it's an air of, oh, you made a mistake. These ignorant ones. Or just like, like a look of, you know better than that. Or, mortal mind seemed to, for me, from my experience, create an air of bullying. Bullying about, the way I see Christian Science is the right way. And like, my primary class teacher, he told us that to rely on anything other than Christian Science treatment, like he said, you will be protected if you rely only on Christian Science treatment, which kind of scare, it's like, oh, I'm not going to be protected if I don't. If I go to a doctor, I'm not protected anymore. I could actually die. Like, I could be dying. And the only way to actually not die would be to keep relying on Christian Science treatment and never go to a doctor. And if you go to the doctor, then you die. Then that was the reason why they died, is because they went to a doctor. But these things they say, was not, you find that, well, Mrs. Eddy didn't say that. Mrs. Eddy didn't say that you are protected only if you rely on Christian Science. She gave us temporary means. She took, she had a gallstone, and she would have morphine. I've had a gallstone. It is one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. And she had that, and she took morphine when, and I did. I went to the emergency room and they gave me something. But she wasn't like this. They tried to, a group of, the board, I don't know, in her, while she was still alive, they tried to create a reading group where they told you they were going to tell everyone. And they started, what you can and cannot read. Like, every book in the whole universe, like all the books out there, of all the books in the whole universe, you can only read these certain ones. And, and she's like, yeah, no, she was always saying, I trust people to have that relationship with God, to turn to God, and God will lead them. And God leads us on a most wonderful adventure to wake us up. The whole purpose is to wake us out of the dream of life and matter. The purpose is not to keep us good Christian Zionists. That's not God's purpose. God doesn't know Christian Science versus Christianity versus Judaism versus, he doesn't, well, and there's no he, but divine mind doesn't play favorites. Divine mind's not like, oh, the Christian Zionists, I'm going to lead to good stuff, but no one else. And I'm only going to lead them, using their Christian Science rules. I'm going to make sure that they follow all the little human Christian Science rules that they put in place. Can you imagine divine mind being limited by rites, rituals, dogma? And can you imagine divine mind thinking anything bad, anything we do is bad and like unredeemable? That's the mortal Christianity, like things that, do's and the don'ts, even with Jesus and his teachings. He was like, it's not what you put in your mouth that's the problem. It's what, comes out of your mouth. He's saying, what you're thinking about things, that's the issue at hand. Not that you don't eat certain foods, like, the Judaism had so many traditions on what you could and couldn't eat and when you could. And he was like, yeah. So, a Jewish person at that time would have thought, well, Jesus isn't being led by God because he's not being led to follow all of these rules. The no work on Sundays, so you can't heal on Sundays. You have to wash your hands before you eat. Come on, that's God's rule. You can't eat pork and you can't eat this and you can't eat that. Those are God's rules. So why would he tell Jesus not to follow those rules? Like, you can understand the Jews of his day would have been super confused because to them all those rules were God's rules. And then Christians, when Christian Science came along, the same thing. Wait. We have to take, we have to do baptism. We have to do the Eucharist. We have to do all these things. And she's like, they're like, God couldn't create a teacher that didn't, follow Christianity the way that, but her job was to take these ideas, these concepts to a higher level of thinking. And there were bullies in the Jewish church. He was talking to the people, to the masses, to the people that weren't working for the church, that weren't the Pharisees and the Sadducees and, the Sanhedrin. Although they listened and although some of them were his students or, his followers, I guess his followers. But he was talking to the masses and he was saying, what they do, don't do. What they say from the book, of the law, listen to that, but don't follow them because they're not living it. They've gone off base. It's all about wealth for them. It's all about status. It's all about who you know and the Sermon on the Mount was pretty earth-shattering for Jewish people of his time, and that's why it was so healing. Because he is talking to these people who have been like, their whole lives. They had been, don't do this, don't do that, because if you did, and they had tradition, and everything had to be this way and that way and that way. And they were like, just, okay, yeah, you're right. I feel bad. Oh God, now I got to go do a sacrifice because I did this, and now I got to go, and women, oh my gosh, women, and their periods and all the stuff that they had to do, it was kind of like mortal mind was just like, and everyone that was in power was like echoing those rules. And so they were just like, they had been like taught, like, and it's much like today. it's much like what I felt is like, was all this like, do this, do that, blah, 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 blah. And you do, I like, you know, marrying someone who wasn't a Christian Scientist was one of the first things, was one of the first gifts I was given, in terms of like him, when I would be like, oh no, we're not supposed to do that. And he would be like, huh? Oh, we don't do that. Oh. You know, like he would say something when we were in a group of Christian Scientists. I'd be like, oh, honey, we don't talk about that, you know, and he'd just be like, huh? He was incredulous. He was like, huh? Really? And then maybe he'd talk about it more, or, you know, and I didn't realize how much, like, oh, we don't talk about our illnesses. Oh, we don't describe it. Like if you're giving a testimony, oh, be careful. Don't say too much. You know, don't. Oh, okay. All right. No, good. You know, yeah. Don't tell anyone. We're not allowed to tell. Well, we're not allowed to tell people who our teachers are. We're not allowed to talk about that. We don't. And, yeah, that was my first, like, kind of introduction to how many little, like, faux pas, like, or we would be like, faux pas, you know, how many do's and don'ts we really have. I think it's surprising how many do's and don'ts we really have. And I've been to the Mother Church services a few times. Like I went to an annual meeting, and then I was just there on vacation a couple times. So I've probably been 3 times to the Mother Church services. And what I felt was just this tightness of, you know, everyone getting dressed up, going serious, fairly quiet, you know, as you're going up the, you know, escalator from the garage, and just this, like, you know, business, this is a business, we're doing, you know, and just quiet, and, you know, go up. And I felt like everyone was holding their breaths, kind of trying to be, making sure that they didn't, you know, it was like a tightness of holding everything in for that, like, hour, and then afterwards going out and doing the nice, like, talking to everyone, what do we call it? Well, socializing. There's a word in the business world that networking is used in the business world, but I think it applies. And I never felt like I could be myself, and I wondered if other people were being themselves, because there was a sense of tradition. This is how we act in church. This is, you know, we just, you know, and I'm sure it was, but worse for our parents, worse for other generations, because, like, you know, there was tales. They were tales. Men were, you know, tales to services. It was really fancy. But even growing up in a Christian Science church, I felt that way too. I felt every Sunday going in and almost holding my breath until I got out, because, you know, you had to be a certain way and act a certain way and be careful what you said and be careful what you did. And, you know, afterwards it was like, the kids all wanted to leave, but the parents were socializing. And now, I mean, we'd finally go sit in the car and wait, and it was just like, but the people that get into management of the church oftentimes feel like they need to kind of reinforce that whole feeling of what it is like to be a Christian Scientist, and maybe there's more pressure on them. They feel more pressure to show everyone, well, I'm living a good Christian Science life because you should too. It's a bullying. It's weird, but it feels really bullying. Like Mortal Mind is bullying us all into its own concept of Christian Science, and it's a claim on us, and more or less we've accepted it, and more or less we're uncomfortable with it. Some of us, are really uncomfortable with it, but we don't know why, and we just feel like, we fall short. I fall short. That's what I always thought, is I fall short. And so, and maybe others feel they fall short, and that's why they try to really put on the show when they're together, There's something about not being able to be yourself, to like breathe and just be you. That is this air of authoritarianism that is a claim on maybe us when we're together. And it's a claim on our sense of who's authority, like, does the church have authority over us? And who is the church? Is that the board? Is that the members? Is that we kind of probably got caught up in a lot of tradition religions of church, just the dressing up and the putting on your best face, your best foot forward, and it says errors always strives to unite in a definition of purpose with truth to give it buoyancy. That kind of holding of our breath and trying to fit into our mold, whether we, my husband, he saw the mold. He was like, there's a talk, there's a certain way you guys talk, and you're all talk the same way. And it wasn't like what we said, but it was like how we acted, how we talked when we were together. If you've ever the different Christian Science groups that get together, the different camps, the Prin upper school, Prin. A lot of people think that you're not a Christian Scientist unless you've gone to Prin or Prin upper school and Prin. But a lot of us who've been there know that, like, a lot of the kids there don't want to be there, and they're not at all into Christian Science, and they're just walking the walk. And if you actually go there, you realize that. But people that don't think, oh, they're the cat's meow. They know what they're, lifelong Christian. I mean, they've been living it. They went to Prin, or they went to the camps, or, they worked at the mother church. I bet it might be harder if you live in Boston to not feel that pressure of, or feel the weight of, the sense of, the mortal mind sense of what Christian Science is. And it's funny, none of that is Christian Science. None of that is in Science and Health. None of that is in prose works. None of that's in her writings. And yet it's like so much to us. And I think, in her first Science and Health, when she, was like, Jesus didn't make the mistake. She said, Jesus didn't make the mistake of forming church. And she wound up doing it because they were going to do it anyways. But, she said in her writing, she says, this isn't going to be a permanent dispensation. I mean, she says the main purpose, in Science and Health, on page 150, the marginal heading is the main purpose. The mission of Christian Science now, as in the time of its earlier demonstration, is not primarily one of physical healing. Now as then, signs and wonders are wrought in the metaphysical healing of physical disease. But these signs are only to demonstrate its divine origin, to test the reality of the higher mission of the Christ power, to take away the sins of the world. Christian Science is the permanent dispensation. This coming, as was promised by the Master, is for the establishment as a permanent dispensation among men, Christian Science. But that's not church. In miscellaneous writings on page 358, when students have fulfilled all the good ends of organization, and they are convinced that by leaving the material forms thereof, the higher spiritual unity is one, then is the time to follow the alma mater, the example of the alma mater. And this is when she was disorganizing the Massachusetts Metaphysical College. Material organization is requisite in the beginning, but when it has done its work, the purely Christly method of teaching and preaching must be adopted. That's interesting because on the same principle, you continue the mental argument in the practice of Christian healing until you can cure without it, instantaneously and through spirit alone. Our teachers haven't reached this when they teach and heal with mental argument. And that's why they haven't graduated from church, on the same principle. It's requisite in the beginning for the beginners, but, many of us are generational Christian Scientists. We've been doing this for a long time, and our families have been doing it. Are we ready for the purely Christly method of teaching and preaching? Or do we still need mortals telling us how to do it? Do you still need mental arguments to heal? Mental arguments. This isn't real. That's real. I am not ill. I'm God's perfect child. Or are you ready for the meat of Christian Science, which is, true demonstration? And that she tells true demonstration on page 107 of miscellaneous writings. It's a proper sense of sin, repentance, and an understanding of good. The proper sense of sin involves self-examination. Examine yourselves and see how much sin claims of you and how much of that claim you admit as valid or comply with. I think there is a time for organization. Obviously, Paul felt we needed it when he started churches, even though Jesus hadn't done that. And, John the Baptist hadn't done that. But Paul seemed to feel it was needed. And Mrs. Eddy listened and followed and did what she was told to do. She knew it wasn't necessary. She knew it wasn't a divine thing, but she heard what she needed, go ahead and do it. Set it up, keep it small, and she did it. She was always listening to God, and she was always following. And she talked about, sometimes I'm led to change my mind. I make this decision and then this decision, and but people think I'm always changing my mind, but I'm not. I'm just listening for divine direction, and then I do that, and then another direction comes, and I do that, and it's just, and that's what I do, and I think that's what she wanted us to do. But lived by her example. She was the way shower. Follow her example. And she left society. She said, I need to resign from church activity, and she went and lived in Concord, and she still kept correspondence, and she did what she needed to do, but she didn't go to church on Sundays when she lived in Concord, did she? Maybe sometimes, I don't know, but I think for the most part, no. She felt it was important to do that, wouldn't she have? Yeah, I think so. Jesus and Mrs. Eddy were just way showers. They were not here to say, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm better than you. Or I know more than you. They were meant to show the way that we will each walk in our own, with bleeding footsteps. So back to Putin. What does Putin have to do with the current state of the Christian Science movement? I think it's his, strong belief that he knows best. And that his people aren't fit to govern themselves, and to, there was a letter, Andrew Hartzog, he who does the banner, who recently passed. He put a newsletter out for every month or every quarter that we would get if you signed up for it, and it was not church sanctioned, and it was not, it was like, this is what I think people in the field need to know about what's going on in church government, things they're not telling you, things that are happening, the number of churches that are disappearing, things that the church, wouldn't share. There's a lot that's happened in the Christian Science church that, has been covered up a lot. And it's been covered up in the name of, we were put in charge of church government, and so that's what we're going to do. And you don't need to worry about it or bother with it. And when people did, or they wrote letters, or there was big campaigns, they were squashed. So we've had an authoritarian church. Like, there's no way around it. We have. And we had people in the church, most, that think they know how to run the Christian Science, and we don't. And some of them knew how to listen and follow. But, it's interesting when you gain this altitude of Christian Science that it's just about your relationship with God, and it's just about your ascension process, and it's not about anything else, and no one else has a say. No one else has a say in your relationship with God, and your, a real Christian Scientist is a miracle, a marvel in the universe of the mortal mind. No one else has a say in how you do what you do in your life, your worship, your practice, a real Christian Scientist, you'd give no mortal authority, any authority over you anymore. You're done. Only God. But in my experience growing, people who are always turning to, well, what should we be doing here? Let's discuss it. Like when I first got on the board of the first church I joined, we would sit around there discussing things and arguing. And I would be like, let's get quiet. Let's just listen, because I don't know what we're supposed to do here. And I did have an opinion. Back then I did have opinions, but I kind of knew we had to get there through prayer. Like I had been learning this like turn to God thing, which was kind of new to me as a Christian Scientist. Like you can turn to God for everything and you'll get everything you need and you'll hear everything, like even what to eat. Like God will, if you let go, God will like lead you what to eat and what to do and where to go and when where to go out to eat, what movie to see. And it's not like, oh, you're gonna be eating salads all the time and seeing only Christian movies. It doesn't work that way. But when you give God reign and God, divine mind leads your entire life, because it's also all a part of your waking up, learning to listen and follow. And they were like, huh? What? You want us to pray in the middle of a meeting? Listen? I'm like, just listen. Let's just listen. What pray? You can call it pray. I think pray has been so adulterated. Even Christian Science, we know you don't pray to a God. But praying has, like, I was taught it was like this, like, mental, you pray, you're affirming the truth, denying the error when you're praying. And so I say listen. And I remember a friend of mine that was on the board that left the church and moved out of state. He later told me, he's like, I've been on church boards and working for the church forever, and I never thought about stopping everything and just everyone listening and praying together. I never thought that we should pray about these issues together. He goes, and this was the first time, and that's what we're going to do from now on. He's going to do from now on. But it was my first time joining a church and being a member of church and being on a board. And so sometimes when you're naive about things, you could say things because you don't realize the rules or what everybody at the tradition. Oh, no one brings up God during the meetings. No one prays. We don't do that because we're really not allowed to talk about the truth. There's this like superstition, like that we're not allowed to talk about the truth because then your way of saying it might lead people astray because I might be wrong and stuff like that. And it's based on some grains of Mrs. Eddy's teachings, but what are we doing if we're not? What are we doing if we're taking a little moment of our life and we're saying, well, okay, in this moment we're not gonna live our lives, totally devoted to God, because really we're not supposed to be talking about Christian Science other than, together. But that's what happens by the testimonies you give, by the ways you respond to people, by the talk in the hallway, by the everything in the foyer when you're all talking, when you're all together, everything you say and you do, people are watching and thinking, oh, that I'm not as good a Christian Scientist as them, or I'm a better Christian Scientist as them. We're all learning from each other, even though we're not officially teaching each other. We're getting all this stuff. We're letting mortal mind be like, oh, that person dresses really nice on Sundays. That's probably real Christian Science. I better do that. I'm just always fall short. I always fall, or, it's silly, the things that we think are real Christian Science. And it's silly, the tradition, like, really, you're running a church without, like, turning to God for direction. All you have to do is sit in the meeting. An issue comes up, everyone gets quiet, everyone listens. I'm hearing we don't need to do anything about this. Or I'm hearing let's hire this landscaping company. I don't know. Our church wasn't run that way. I don't know about others. Jesus's teachings were, he taught the multitudes, and a lot of what he said was like, blessed are the poor in spirit, humble. He was saying, your church leadership is not humble at all. And he was pointing that out to them. They knew what he was pointing out to them, because in their society, humility was not a virtue. It's a virtue in Christian Science. Humility is lens and prism to the understanding, is what she says, lens and prism. But when you call a practitioner, humility is lens and prism to the understanding of mind healing on miscellaneous writing, page 356. It must be had to understand our textbook. It is indispensable to personal growth, and points out the chart of its divine principle and rule of practice. Humility is never like speaking, like someone asks you something, you're like, boom, I know what the answer is. Like teachers and practitioners, boom, I gotta have an answer when they call. Boom, I I gotta have an answer when they, and so they do. I got an answer. Humility is like, let me think about that. I had a friend who had left the church, who was a CSB, he left the church, had a huge practice, and realized all this stuff and had left. And when you called him, he said, I will be listening. He said, we will be listening. He was like, let's listen. And you got a phone and you listened. You're like, yeah, I gotta listen. He's gonna be listening. I'm gonna be listening. We're listening. And it's to come to you. The answer should come to you. The error that needs to surface should come to you. To put yourself out there as a intermediary between you and God, it requires some hubris. And I remember when I first became a practitioner, I thought maybe that was my job, that they're calling me because they can't hear, and so I'm the one to hear and give them the 411. No. If you're led to someone, they're, and they're connected to divine mind, and they're in the mind, and they're in as soul, and they're just, being. You're just calling someone who's unmesmerized, and their unmesmerized state will help unmesmerize you, and then you'll hear what you need to hear. If you have to stay in the practice, and you have to stay as a teacher because it's not yet time for you to leave, then that's all you can do. You can just be, and you being should be everything it should be enough, because God, the divine mind, that person calling is the being that person calling is, has everything it needs. at every moment to do anything. They know the truth. They know, how to proceed. They know, because they're all knowing, all seeing, all acting, all wise, because that definition really applies to us as the true being that we are, that definition. And so, okay, they seem to be mesmerized at the moment. They're calling, and, I'll listen, they'll listen, if, and that's it. It's really, when you're at that level, you trust, you trust a divine mind in no uncertain terms. And you would never be tempted to think, God isn't in control right now. I'm needed. I'm going to come and save the day because God's just let things come to this. What has God done? You would never be tempted to think that. And you would never be tempted to speak when you're not being told to speak. Treat if you're not being told to treat, take a patient if you're not being told to take a patient. You're just listening, following, and if people call for help, well, maybe they're being led, maybe that, but I'm not going to change the way I do anything. And, for me, calling my friend, I always would hear things, maybe not immediately, maybe the next morning. That often happened the next morning. I don't know why. I would wake up knowing what I needed to know. But we can all do that ourselves if we trust, if we try, if we practice. Anything else would be Putin. Anything else is Vladimir Putin. Any other way of being in the Christian Science leadership team, as a teacher, a practitioner, a board member, middle management, upper management, monitor management, print management, camp management, and they're not even, but it's all blurred together. Anything where you think you know better than others and that you're going to show them what they don't know and teach them what they don't. Anything where you've got something like, I'm going to help, I'm going to fix this situation, I'm going to heal this church, I'm going to, make a living off of healing others, or Christian Scientists are so lonely. They're so lonely, so we're going to put together a social group for them. They feel so out because they can't talk to others. They can't be friends with others. So we're going to pull them all together. It's lonely being a Christian Science teen. There's no one like them. We're going to make them feel special. Well, maybe there's no one like them for a reason. And maybe this is their time to start learning to trust in God. And maybe what they're learning by being different from everybody else is an important lesson for them. And maybe putting them together with other people who think they know what it is, Christian Science is, or who think their family knows, or, they only want to be around certain families because only certain families know and other families don't. And, they're letting their kids go crazy and run wild, and we don't want our kids to be around that. And, any stuff that's going on from the human level of thinking. That's Vladimir Putin. Because he really, if you want to help heal authoritarianism in the world today, you have to heal it within your own thinking. Anytime you think another individual, your child, your family member, another church member, doesn't have that connection with God, and they just, they're not, you don't understand, they're not hearing. Oh, really? Is that because they're living life different than you? that you think they're not hearing? Is that because they act different than you? They talk different than you? They really don't have, the look or the feel of a Christian Zionist. Like, humility. It takes a lot of humility to give up our way of seeing our fellow man and thinking, they are or they aren't listening, and that maybe they should be a different way. They should be, acting a certain way, talking a certain way. Oh, they play too many video games. Is that they shouldn't. Okay. Like, okay, but where are you getting all this from? Is it from quiet listening and humble listening and just living your life totally devoted to the divine mind and giving all authority to that divine mind and not to other institutions? Does your church have authority over you? Does your, spouse have authority over you? Your parents? Do you do you live your life the way your parents think it's right to live the life? Like, are you devoted to the way your parents raised children and think that's, what are you looking as your examples? What political party, like, are you looking at a political party and saying, yeah, that's they're thinking the right way, and that's the way I think, and, oh, what are they thinking on this issue? Yeah. Or your news station, what are they thinking on that issue? And are you, or are you coming out of the material world and being separate? Science and Health, page 451. Christian Zionists must live under the constant pressure of the apostolic command to come out from the material world and be separate. If you want to set a good example for your children, that's what you do. You come out of the material world and you be separate. And you just live your life devoted to God. And you let go of everything that's not coming from God. If you have an identification with being a certain social group or a certain class, like I'm middle class or upper middle class, do you have that? Do you have an identification with a class? What if you all of a sudden lost all your money and you were poor? Would that affect your identity? Does your identity rely on a certain amount of wealth, a certain amount of prestige? What if you got kicked out of the church and they labeled you, in an apostate? I think in Mormon church they get labeled an apostate, or but here it would be like not a Christian Zionist anymore. You got labeled that. Would that affect your being? Would you think, oh, my identity is now taking a hit and I don't think I can deal with this? If, think about all the, if you lost your job, if you got fired, if you had to start doing Uber and Lyft. I was a CPA. It took a lot of work to get my CPA. I didn't go the normal CPA path. I didn't but I did get it, and I was an accountant, and I did make decent money. And when I was led to leave a really good job and go into the practice, I did. And And then I was led to leave the practice, and I wasn't hearing anything else. And then I was led to take, care for my mother-in-law for a while. And then I wasn't hearing anything else. And then I was led to go back to take a consulting accounting job for a while, and I did that. And then when I was led to leave, I did that. And then I didn't hear anything else for a while. And then I was led to do Uber and Lyft for a while. So I did that for a while. And it was not easy. I knew. I could hear I was being directed. All the pieces fell into place for me driving Uber and Lyft, rideshare. And guess what? There was still an identity that I had to deal with feeling like it was low, like it was below me. And it was really interesting because the way that I was treated, the way that rideshare drivers are treated is like, oh, these people can't get any other jobs. Oh, these people, there is a treatment, the way people treat you. It's like a lot of people are nice, but there's always, you notice the difference from the way you've been treated in your life to the way you're treated when you're a rideshare driver. And I realized I still had an identification with my degree, with my credentials, with my middle class status, with and those years I think it was a year I spent doing Uber and Lyft. Got rid of that. I let that all go, and I had a really wonderful experience doing it. And then I was led back into another accounting position for a year, and then led to leave that, and another one, and then led to leave that, and it's just like a lot of the stuff we're led to do is like we need it for our growth. Like we're led, like some of the positions that I've been in where just fairly difficult circumstances, and the way that you're treated and the way that you're overworked or the way that the office runs, or it's hitting on a bunch more trigger points for you, that closely held material beliefs that you didn't realize you had. And a lot of the things we're led to do, if you're not open and you're not willing to just listen and follow, you miss out on so much good and so many opportunities for growth, for awakening, things that need to be uncovered in your thinking that I didn't realize that was there. Like a job, I was high anxiety, super high anxiety. I was a controller. I didn't realize that there was a sense of anxiety in me. Like, if you would have said, do you suffer from anxiety? I'd be like, oh no, that's a made up thing. or depression. I dealt with depression. Oh no, that's a made up thing. And then I was put into positions where I suffered from depression and anxiety at the same time. And it's like, oh, yeah, I have these expectations of myself in a job. I like to live up to other people's expectations. I'm a people pleaser in my jobs. I'm not in real life, because the people pleasing that was handled many years ago. I used to be a people pleaser. Everything anybody wanted me. Oh yeah. Oh, I want to make you happy. Oh, I want to be the best version of myself that makes you happy. I think that's what we feel a lot in church, is that pressure to be the version of ourselves that fits their mold, what they think is the right. Or we do that with our parents, we do that with our spouses, we do that with our friends, and we do that with people who we don't even like but we want to impress. I had given all of that up and just was myself with people, or to the most part. But at work I found, no, I'm not like that. I'm a super duper people pleaser, trying to get everything done and be the everything for everyone. And that was like anxiety. I was holding this high expectations of myself. And if I didn't live up to it, I was holding myself to such standards. But, without that experience, I wouldn't have learned that about myself. So even though Julie is a, unwilling participant in all of this, participant in my true self, my true nature, I'm so grateful to have had all these experiences, because I know that the freedom that has come from them. And, with an authoritarian belief system, we don't get to experience these things. Like my authoritarian belief system as Julie was, this is what success looks like. And this is what you will do to obtain success, dear one, myself. And then all of the hits my ego took as I was like Jonah in a lot of situations where I was incredulous at first that this is what I needed to do. No, that couldn't be. Because that's just not, no. Really don't do that. That's not done. Like when I left church, that's not done. You don't do that. People don't. You can't call yourself, you can be a Christian Scientist and not be in the church. You can still, people, okay. Huh. But if you have an authoritarianistic belief system that you're following, whether it's yours, your parents, your spouses, societies, there is, whether you know it or not, there's a belief system about being poor. There's a belief system about being middle class. There's a belief system about being rich. And we tend to follow these. And just we're molded by them. We're kind of in it without even really knowing it. They're running our lives. They're a political party running our thinking and our lives. Our schools, whatever schools we went to, we don't go to those types of schools, or it has to be this kind of school, or, it's still a belief system about what's right and wrong for you. It's still an authority in your mind. And if God came, if you heard the voice, go to this school, and you'd be like, oh, but no. Then oh, yeah, okay. I'm hearing this and I'm feeling, ugh, why? And, it's really about asking ourselves why. Why have I put, why do I think this is the right way to do, or this is the right way to live, or this is the right, the proper grooming of the house, the proper grooming of ourselves, the proper everything. So many parents these days really grooming their children to, there's just like a little plant, like clip a little here, force a little move over there, add a little this, add a little that, nothing, and they're just trying to affect the growth of their child through human stuff, through human means, and for human reasoning. You always know if it's for human reasoning, because they won't get into a good school, because then they'll always be poor, because they'll, well, none of that is because they didn't listen to God. It's all if you can come up with a human reason why you're doing things, it's oftentimes you're not listening. Sometimes you hear things and to do, and you can see all the human reasons for it, but not always. Often you're like, oh, there's no human reasoning behind that. I don't know. Going to be Uber and Lyft, my human reasoning, well, I'm a trained accountant. I had an active CPA license. Why would I need to do Uber and Lyft to make money? There was no human reasoning there that I could come up with, but it was what I knew I had to do. People want things from us. They want us to be a better family member, be a better sister, Be a better parent. Be a better, worker bee. Be a better role model. Be a better friend. Go out more often. Do things more often. A better soccer mom. People want things from us. They want us to be a better everything. And God wants nothing from us but to help us wake up from the material world, to help us come out and be separate. And all these people, they don't, they're not, I don't think even Putin, I don't know. But what he wants from his people, what he wants from his country, what he wants from others, that's what he wants. And he thinks it's the best for them. It's the best for everyone, And people in your life are always going to think they know better than you. And they're always going to want, oh, you should go out more often. Oh, you go out too much. You should lose weight. Wow, you're really skinny. You think maybe you should put on a few pounds? And I don't know, they're not doing it because they're evil and they want to control you per se. But that's what's happening, is that their concept of reality, they're trying to convince you that concept of reality that they have, that's the right one. And that's what happens at church. People aren't evilly trying to oppress you or make you fit into their mold, but that's just what they think is the right thing to do. And so it's this is but that's what error tries to fit into the cover of truth, by parents that think, oh, it's not a bad thing that I control every minute of my child's time. It's the only way to keep them on task, the only way that I can be assured they're gonna have the right path. They need this. They need me to tell them every minute what they should be doing. And the church has gone through so much of that, feeling they needed to tell us what to do and what to read, and they're so afraid. They've been so afraid to just let us find our way and to trust, that it's a wonderful position to be in, to trust that your child has that relationship to God, that your church members have that relationship to God, that your citizens of your country already have that relationship to God, and they need to work it out. They need to work it out, and you got to give them the space to work it out. And sometimes things don't go the way you want them to go. Maybe the child gets into trouble. But maybe that's the thing, is that their mind, what they're thinking is causing that trouble. And by experiencing that, or the results of it, or whatever, then they learn from it, and then, where does she say the sooner they learn, the better? She talks a lot about sooner or later. Right? Adjust the balance sooner or later. Miscellaneous Writings 278. If they must learn by the things they suffer, the sooner this lesson is gained, the better. It's really interesting. This is a wonderful paragraph. I have felt for some time that perpetual instruction of my students might substitute my own for their growth, and so dwarf their experiences. If they must learn by the things they suffer, the sooner this lesson is gained, the better. This is it's in the chapter Precept Upon Precept, Loyal Christian Scientists. And this article is called Loyal Christian Scientists. And it's a beautiful article. It's pretty short. Miscellaneous Writings, page 278. In the dark hours, wise Christian Scientists stand firmer than ever in their allegiance to God. Falsehood is on the wings of the winds, but truth will soar above it. Truth is speaking louder, clearer, and more imperatively than ever. Error is walking to and fro in the earth, trying to be heard above truth, but its voice dies out in the distance. Whoever proclaims truth loudest becomes the mark for error's shafts. The archers aim at truth's mouthpiece, but a heart loyal to God is patient and strong. The stake and scaffold have never silenced the messages of the Most High. No evidence before the material senses can close my eyes to the scientific proof that God good is supreme. Error will hate more as it realizes more the presence of his tormentor. I shall fulfill my mission, fight the good fight, and keep the faith. Those who are tried in the furnace reflect the image of their Father. You, my beloved students, who are absent from me and have shared less of my labors than many others, seem stronger to resist temptation than some of those who have had line upon line and precept upon precept. This may be a subversible hint, since necessities and God's providence are foreshadowed. I have felt for some time that perpetual instruction of my students might substitute my own for their growth, and so dwarf their experience. If they must learn by the things they suffer, the sooner this lesson is gained, the better. I'll leave it there.